Do angels have access to our mind?
They do, God permitting.
What does that look like?
So the angels can do actually two things in relationship to us. The first is they can put an image in our imagination and even put a perspective on that image, just as the demons can do the same thing. So the demons can not only just put an image in your imagination, because we get these thoughts, where did this come from, right? But they can even put a perspective on, like, this would be really good, right? And this is why sometimes people will come to me, like normal men, normal heterosexual men will come to me and they'll say, I had this bizarre experience where I was in this situation and I had this thought of pedophilia and I had this kind of like inclination of the good. I said, well, that's not your junk, right? That's not you. Demons can make anything look appealing. One exorcist contacted me recently because he had kind of gone through that type of thing. He was working with this one woman who, by any stretch of the imagination, was not good looking whatsoever. But when she walked in the door during one of the sessions, the demon skewed his perceptions and his in relationship to it. And he said he looked at her and he felt this inclination, like, she's just beautiful. And then he realized intellectually, he was like, that ain't true. And so he just stopped, did some prayers, broke it. And then when he looked at her again, he says, ugly as sin, right? So the point being is they can get that perspective. The angels can also do the same thing because perceptions are either in congruity with reality or they're not. For example, let's just take transgenderism. People's perceptions about who they are may or may not be. If you're a normal heterosexual male, you say, hey, I'm a male, and this is then my perceptions are in congruity with reality. But if I'm some dude who thinks he's a woman, your perceptions aren't in congruity with reality. And so demons are constantly trying to put perspectives on it that either exaggerate or skew or falsify your perception of reality, whereas the good angels can actually do the opposite. They can put perspectives on the imagination and then so that you get a greater perception of this is the truth of the matter. This is the reality of it. So one of the ways that you'll notice that is you'll get a bit of clarity in a situation. All of a sudden you'll see the perspective and realize, okay, that's how this is actually done. The one thing that angels can do, which demons never do, is the angels can then, so there's three parts of our intellect. I'm not going to go into all three, but there's two parts that I want to talk about. The first is the brain. That's the image part. And they can put a perspective. They can affect that. But then there's a part of our intellect that's entirely immaterial. And the reason we know that, for example, is when we die, then people in heaven, you hear about these with people who actually die and they actually go through a judgment and they might see Christ and that type of thing. Their intellect is functioning independently of their body. So we know there's a part of the intellect that's in part of that. There's also certain operations that we perform, like the ability to self-reflect upon ourselves. That we know that there's a part of our intellect that's purely immaterial, that can function independently of matter. This is why animals, even apes, don't have that same kind of self-reflection. Even when they see themselves in the mirror, it's kind of a fascination to them but that's all at the level of the material. But as human beings, we have this. But the angels can actually, that immaterial part of it has the ability to make judgments about things, that something's right or true or that type of thing. How do we know that? We can have, I'll give you an example. A guy, his wife, when he first gets married, his perspective on her is, she's wonderful, she's lovely, I love her, she's just such a great wife, she's beautiful, etc. And his intellectual judgment is the same as that. But then what can happen is that over the course of the marriage, bad things happen. And so his perspective on her begins to change, and then also does his judgment changes. But he can make a choice to change his judgment about that. Like if he starts thinking his wife is really bad and nasty, she may or may not be. He can start making a choice of, you know what? I'm not going to judge her that she's that bad. I think she's ultimately a woman of goodwill. It's just that I'm suffering in relationship to it. That means I got to shore up stuff on my part. So I can make a judgment, or I can make a choice to start looking at her, judging her differently. So that's one of the things. Okay, why is that important? Because angels can strengthen, it's called illumination. They can illuminate the mind, that immaterial part, so that when we make that act of judgment, we see it with much greater clarity and strength and depth. And so they can enlighten our minds. And so you can ask them, give me good images and then help me to see, help me to enlighten my mind in relationship to it. The fathers of the church actually say it was the angels who taught the Greeks philosophy, people like Aristotle and Plato. And that's why there's such a radical shift in their philosophy from the materialists to Plato and then to Aristotle.
What rank structure of the angels is putting images and clarity into our mind?
Primarily those of the rank of angel, the very lowest,
The guardian angel.
the guardian angels.
Archangels?
The archangels can at times. They can also do it as well. It depends. There are certain people, according to the fathers of the church, that their stature in life is so important that God intends for their particular life that he actually will assign angels that are higher in the hierarchy. Because what rank or how high in the hierarchy of angels your angel is directly proportional to how important you're supposed to be in human history, they say. And so, but there are certain people that God will actually assign an archangel to guard them, at least while they're fulfilling that role. So like people in positions of political power are generally considered that. Priests, bishops, that type of thing are given a guardian angel, an archangel in order for relationship to that. If there's a particular function that they're going to play in relationship to us as human beings that's extremely important, they come from the rank of archangels. So Gabriel, Michael, Raphael were considered part of the archangel.
Let's take a quick break. All right, Father Ripperter, we got a hot question for you.
Okay.
So I want to understand, why is Christianity the only religion in the world that is acceptable to disparage?
Well, Satan is the prince of this world, and it's pretty clear, at least it seems to me, but it's pretty clear, I think, to a lot of people that Satan and the demons are gaining much greater ascendancy over the world, and as they influence the world more and more, they will use people and they will use the things of this world in order to go after the one religion that they know is true. I often tell people that, in heaven, the demons actually, because the fact that Christ was going to become incarnate, and they actually watched Christ preach Revelation, they know it perfectly. And so as a result of that, and they know that he was the Messiah that was about to come, that he was going to be the one that was incarnate. So they know, not from faith anymore, because they lost their faith, but they know just by deductive reason that this is the true religion. All other religions don't have human beings who started them, whereas Christ, who's God, is the only one who started this religion, and they saw it. And so they know the rest of the other religions don't wash. And so you can, as the demons gain greater and greater control of the world, and as evil becomes more and more in place, there's two factors that come into play. The first is that demons move people to punish the Christians, which we saw in administrations even in this country where they were going after the Christians. And then you'd look at these people and you can tell these people were not living good lives, that were persecuting the Christians. So the demons will inspire the people to go after the Christians. We also see this in relationship to, certain religions attacking the Christians in different countries and that type of thing. So you see that. The other part of the dynamic has to do with the fact that St. Thomas talks about it in a question in the Summa, but there's a structure to how human beings go from pursuing and seeing the good to actually pursuing things that are evil. And it basically it's a process in which we have natural inclinations to things that are good. And so, for example, he gives the example, a guy recognizes that fornication is immoral, right? So he recognizes that. But then Bessie Sue walks in, and she's just gorgeous. And so he ends up falling with Bessie Sue, and St. Thomas says he thinks that it's, he kind of gives in, like it's okay in this one instance. And then, but he keeps hanging around Bessie Sue, so he keeps falling with her, and eventually he starts thinking that, well, fornication isn't wrong, And then as he keeps fornicating, then what he actually thinks is that, well, no, fornication is actually a good thing. And then what happens next? Well, people who tell me fornication's bad, they're evil people because I know fornication's good. That is the exact progression we actually saw in this country. The greatest generation knew that fornication was immoral, but they started fornicating behind the scenes, and that's where the fornication really started. And how do we know? Because when the hippie generation started the fornication openly, they didn't stop them because, hey, well, can't tell them we did that because we did it, right? So it goes from, no, they can't do it, but they fell from time to time, to, okay, now they were openly doing it. Then by the time you get to the 80s and 90s, you should live with your girlfriend before you get married, and which is a good thing, right? Because you should fornicate, find out if it's going to work. And then what's the last thing? Now you have people who, when you say, hey, you need to be chaste, the guys need to stop doing this, they get attacked. And so, in addition to the demons driving this, now you have people whose lives are so disordered that what they see as good is bad, and what it is actually they see as bad is actually good. And so they see, and this is why we actually see Christ mention this. He says there will come a time when they will actually believe that by eradicating the people who follow him, they're actually doing the will of God.
I mean, it's interesting. You know, I mean, I think all religions have been persecuted at one point or another through time.
Yeah.
If you talk bad about Islam, you're a bigot.
Right.
I mean, and that's the same with multiple religions. If you talk about Judaism, you'll be ostracized from everything.
That's right.
It is the ultimate no-no. Correct.
Right.
And I don't understand. I mean, why are Christians accepting this? You know, in all the other religions, you see this righteous anger.
That's right.
You know, if their religion or their people are disparaged.
Right.
With Christianity, and I'm guilty of it too. We let it slide. Why is that?
I think we let it slide because
Are we conditioned?
yes, I think that's it. We're conditioned to actually believe that when Christ said, turn the other cheek, that we just let people get away with whatever they want. And that's not actually the case. You basically, when he said you turn the other cheek, or, you have to forgive even those who do those bad things and give you, yeah, you have to forgive them. But that doesn't mean that you extend the effects of that forgiveness to them, because that might be bad for them, St. Thomas says. And so, for example, he says, you should have charity. You should have love of God and love of neighbor for the sake of God for everybody. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily show the effects of that love to somebody, because then it would confirm them in their sin, and it's actually going to be bad for them. And so what's happened is Christians have gone to excess and just thinking, we just have to let people walk all over us. And that's not what Christ was saying. In fact, we have an obligation to fight for and to protect the glory of Christ himself, Christ the King. We have an obligation to fight for him. And the fact that we actually don't do that is based upon this effeminate unwillingness to battle, because we think it's we're just being charitable, or we're trying to be Christian and be merciful. Look, sometimes being merciful to somebody is actually bad for them. And so God is going to be merciful when we meet those conditions, always. But in relationship to us as human beings, we can't extend the mercy to people if they're doing evil and harm and offending God.
I mean, do you think this is just going to continue to get worse?
I do.
What can people do? I mean, in your mind or your idea, how do Christians, defend their faith? I mean, it's being ripped out of government. This country was founded on Christianity. It's being ripped out of schools. Many people are offended if you even bring it up in school. However, all these other ideologies, we're forced to comply with. LGBTQ,
Right.
Islam, Judaism, all of them. They're all accepted except Christianity.
I think there's two things. The first thing is that a lot of Christians don't know their faith well. And so a lot of times they get mocked up, and a lot of times they don't fight, or if they do fight, they fight badly because they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know how to disarm these people. I'm thinking of a particular bishop in his interview with Ben Shapiro. I'm like, man, that was a missed opportunity, because he really could have set the record straight on a few things. So in addition to, they have to know what they're talking about and have to know this stuff, they also have to know the other religions to know where they're wrong, and to be able to see this. And also these other ideologies, they have to know why these things are actually bad. But then the second part of it is they just have to man up. They just basically have to say, okay, look at, there's two things that I think that they have to do in relationship to that is they have to be willing to suffer other people's, chaffing at them and et cetera. It reminds me of the allegory of the cave in Plato, where that people in the cave see these projections and think that's reality, and that's not even reality. Reality is outside. So the guy tried to drag him outside, and they're chaffing with him the whole way they're dragging him outside. And even if they get outside and they see the truth, they want to go back to this, right? It's the same kind of a thing that you see here. They're going to chaff at you. So you just have to stay the course and be willing to tell the truth. The second thing is we have to be willing to wield the axe. And by that, I mean we have to be willing to clear the deck. We have to start telling people, oh, I'm offended by that. I don't care. I'm more concerned that you know the truth than your emotions are hurt. We have to stop allowing people to follow their emotions. We have to stop following our own emotions in relationship. We have to be willing to follow reason. And it doesn't mean you go around just being obnoxious, but it means that we have to be willing to fight with people. And if they just say, well, I'm offended, well, it's tough. That's just life. That's just reality. If you want to know the truth, you're willing to follow the truth. And the other side of it is the hypocrisy of it all. We have to recognize that when we give into these people, we're giving into their hypocrisy, because these people say, well, you're offensive to me. What you believe is offensive to me. Well, so is what you believe is offensive to me, and I think it's offensive to God. So we just have to say, okay, well, then what we have to do is we have to be willing to fight the truth, fight for the truth, be willing to take the beating for it in order to actually achieve in order to clear the deck. Now, there's one reason why I tell people they have to be willing to do this. Have you ever noticed that nobody will talk about something, nobody will say anything until one guy gets up there and says, this is a bunch of bunk and here's why.
He makes it safe for everybody else.
Yes, he breaks the ice.
I know a couple guys like that.
Yeah. But it breaks the ice, and then from there, it becomes a legitimate topic of discussion and people can actually start talking about it. But that's what we have to be willing to do. We have to be willing to break the ice or wield the axe in relationship to this, because once the truth gets out there, then it starts dispelling the darkness and people start seeing it, and people that are normally of goodwill will start signing off to it and say, yeah, I actually believe that. So, I mean, we actually see this even, just recently, even just politically, you were never allowed to talk or mention Christianity or whatsoever. But now once it's started talking about it, now a lot of people are talking about it. So it's that one guy's got to break the ice. And so people have to be willing to be that one guy. But I tell guys, you may or may not be that guy. You have to make sure, A, that you have the virtue to do it, to sustain the beating, and you also have to be the guy that knows what he's talking about. And don't presume you know. You got to really know.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to find the truth and follow the truth, then you should be willing to defend the truth.
That's right.
Break the ice no matter what the consequences.
That's right. Personal cost. To go back to one of the points is, you have to be willing to be separated from the lesser good in order to pursue the greater good. Guys have to be willing to take the beating, to be separated from the comfort and the adulation of other people. They have to be willing to be separated from that in order to pursue the good, regardless of the personal cost, which is the greater good.